Good afternoon, folks. We're just waiting a few minutes for all the attendees to join the webinar. Please stand by. All right, I think we'll start. Oh, I see another. Okay. Um, Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the 13th annual CUNY Accessibility Conference. I hope you all enjoyed this morning's keynote speech by Dr. Christopher Rosa as much as I did. My name is Christopher Lydon. I'm Associate Director of Student Services at the CUNY School of Professional Studies, and I am very happy to be here as the moderator today for this session entitled Promoting Human Flourishment Through Campus and Community Accessibility, a Justice Forward Approach. Before we get started, I just want to mention a couple of quick housekeeping items. First off, captions are available. You can enable those at the bottom of your screen using the CC button. And I think from there you have a choice or two to enable different ways to view the captions. Our American Sign Language interpreters will be spotlighted for all to see, but please pin them to your screen so that you can have an uninterrupted view of them. If you require video later on during Q&A to sign your question, or a microphone to access the voice for your question, please make that request in the chat so we can update your access to the microphone and/or video accordingly when it comes time for the question and answers. Right now, your microphones are off, so probably the Q&A session will start toward the end of or after the presentation itself, around maybe 1 o'clock. We'll see. And yeah. Great, so it is now my pleasure to introduce our panelists for today. Also, sorry, to share resources or links with others, please enter that information in the chat so I can share that with attendees. And lastly, if you're experiencing any technical issues, kindly let us know in the chat so our tech support team can do their best to assist you. All right, with those items out of the way, I would like to introduce Cassandra Evans, Assistant Professor of Disability Studies from the CUNY School of Professional Studies, Matthew Conlin, Managing Journal Editor and Adjunct Faculty Member from CUNY SPS, and our two students, Allison Murphy, Disability Studies BA student from CUNY SPS, and Matthew Hines, Disability Studies BA student from CUNY SPS. And I would like to congratulate the students. They're in their capstone semester, so it's very exciting. And over to you, panelists.
Thank you so much, Christopher, and thank you to the CAC for choosing our panel. We're so excited to be here today. I'm Cassandra Evans. I'm Assistant Professor of Disability Studies in the Disability Studies Department at CUNY School of Professional Studies. I'm going to start by having you listen to or read captions from a song that I want to play a little bit of. It's spring break is starting tomorrow, so it might kind of get us all in the groove, but there are some particular lyrics that I want to highlight given our topic. And our topic today is promoting human flourishment through campus and community accessibility, a justice forward approach. This is Stevie Wonder. The main thing I wanted to highlight is he says, though the world is full of problems, they couldn't touch us if they try. And if you have a chance to look up the lyrics to this song, you might enjoy them. He also later says, when you're moving in the positive, your destination is the brightest star. And I really do feel like working in the CUNYverse, the universe that is CUNY and all of the students that we serve, is really an opportunity to move toward the brightest star. I'm very happy to be here in this space with you all. So I'm just going to forward my slides and tell you what I think about and why we chose this title, and in response to the theme today. So flourishment or flourishing, what do we think about? I think about how we can, again, serve our students to achieve the absolute most that they want to, right? And so flourishing is not just surviving or being accepted or being given access to, but really being supported so that people can achieve their ultimate goals and dreams. Justice, I want to talk a little bit about too. On this slide, I have a quote from Dr. Cornel West, who is a philosopher and an activist. You may have heard of him. But I was fortunate enough a few years ago to be working at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, where I was an academic advisor for years. I was starting to work on my doctorate in disability studies, but I was advising students. And I was lucky one night to be working late, and someone said Dr. Cornel West was coming on campus, which I couldn't believe. He was literally on campus at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. So I was able to go upstairs and see him speak in person. And those of you who have seen him, you know, he's very charismatic. But he came in and it was a cold, rainy night, and a lot of students had shuffled into this cafeteria, and we were just so mesmerized by his presence. But he came in and he said, "This is John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Why don't you all tell me what you think justice is?" And the room got quiet. And I don't know if that's because no one knew what to say, or again, we were all so honored to be in his presence. But you could hear a pin drop. And he finally spoke, and you know, he's always wearing that black suit, a white shirt and a black tie. And he held on to the podium and he looked out at us and he said, "Justice is what love looks like in public." And what did he mean by that? Justice is what love looks like in public. He said, you know, that care that you give to your kin, people that are in your inner circle, whether that's your blood relatives or your very close friends, that's love, that care. So when a student comes to you and says, "Oh, I really want to get a master's degree because I want this job," or "I want to finish my bachelor's degree and then travel abroad," or "I need an accommodation for this particular disability." Dr. West said, think of how you would give service to that person if they were your kin. He said, well, that's what justice looks like in public. If we were to really promote that work with every single student that we serve, every single person that walks through the door, that's what justice would be, what love looks like in public. And I like to think about that a lot when I'm serving students, whether I'm teaching or advising or just having a conversation with a student. So that's where I wanted to start. And next, I'm going to have my colleague, Matt Conlin, talk about his ideas of justice and technology and then he'll introduce our really wonderful students who are here today, and they'll tell you about their journeys. Thank you so much. Matt.
Thank you, Cassandra. So today I really wanted to start with a few quotes that I think are really important. One of them is from Elizabeth Seltzer and is from her book, Restricted Access. What she says essentially is that it's important to interrogate disability media access through multiple lenses, particularly regulation, use, form, content, and experience. And to me, what that means really is that in order to provide disability justice and inclusion, we must think how a medium or platform is defined, what is its intended use and who is it used by, and then how and what cultural and technological means is it accessed? Does it present alternatives? What experience and content is being pursued? And what are the correlated cultural values tied to it? So media access is not just how we present the content, but who are we including in that conversation? And then we have another quote from Gerard Goggin in his Manifestos for the Future of Critical Disability Studies that says, technology has a vital role in contemporary social life, especially in relation to disability. Really what he's saying here is despite how much we focus on disability and technology in the critical work, it's rarely infused with disability studies and disability rights approaches. In other words, we talk about disability from other lenses, but we're not always talking about it from a social model lens or from a social justice lens. And so with my slide here, it says technology and disability, assistive technology and social media have advanced social justice endeavors for people with disabilities. The work from home solution during COVID-19 has proven that there is a need to incorporate these technologies seamlessly into education, yet streamlining this use and incorporating disability studies and social justice lenses to education and other fields has been slow. Next slide, please, Cassandra. Furthermore, technology and education. There is a necessity to improve the infrastructure and streamline online educational practices. Training should always be available for faculty and staff in how to test for accessibility, how to account for assistive technology, and basically include the best online and hybrid educational practices. I think communication is key on that part. And in the courses that I've taught specifically, I've taught a film and literature course with disability studies lens, and I've taught disability and diversity, and I'm now teaching the bachelor's capstone. And I think that when we talk about access online, especially with our online bachelor's program, what's important is communication with the students. We're going to encounter issues of technology sometimes. We're going to encounter issues with compatibility with IT and somebody's computer or somebody's internet access. And I think if we really take a social justice lens, what we're saying is that we're putting the person at the forefront and we're doing what we can to troubleshoot the technical issues that come into place and finding solutions so that they don't happen in the future. And for this reason, we actually have our two lovely panelists joining us, my students. And I want to hand my mic over to Allison, who's going to talk a little bit about her experiences. So thank you. Take it away, Allison.
Yeah. Next slide, please, Cassandra. I have always been between the world of the disabled and students of the night. I never quite fit into either. CUNY SBS fell into my lap. after starting with my mentor, I finally found a place where I can be my best self, where I could share my experiences and learn about others. We live in a world full of judgment of imperfections. As Judy, humans are just. We must learn to accept all people, rich and poor, perfect and imperfect, the same and those that are different. In order for all to thrive and be the very best person that they can be. Next slide. Next slide, please. My personal motto is to strive for the impossible. Is my goal to shine light on the possibilities of what can be accomplished if you try. Behind every picture is a story of challenges that created the moment. From entering public spaces from back to moonlit alleys to almost whipping over on a poorly sloped rooftop ramp to walking straight through the gates of Disney. The smiles on my face reflect how happy I am to be part of the moment. At each moment in time, I faced stares and questioning looks. And even once, someone stated if I had to live like that, I would stay home. Quite honestly, it's those comments and those people that judge me before knowing me that don't understand. Before CUNY, I was in a place where those that were supposed to help me hindered me. That's when you need to self-advocate. We don't trust your assistant to not cheat. I needed to jump over the highest hurdle just to be part of class. But like at CUNY, I found the professors to be accommodating to my needs. They knew the student I was and appreciated what I had to do to get there. At CUNY, the only issues I've had are the work result of not being able to see. Everything is so visible from videos, reading, videos to Zoom meetings to perfecting capstone projects to make them visually appealing. I use screen readers for my assignments and have issues with poor copies that are not, or those that are not OCR compatible. The screen reader converts the document into a digital format, but if the copy is bad, the information is slanted on the page, has pictures, or has curved edges from copying a book. the reader reads straight across the page, even when it's not set up that way. I brought it to the attention of the professors and the disabilities office, but it still continues week after week. I obtained alternative tax documents only to find out the following week I needed to request them again. Thankfully, as a backup, I have an assistant that can read for me, but shouldn't have to. It's hard and feels like I'm asking too much to have the material that everybody else can read easily. Every time I have to ask, it reminds me that I'm disabled and cannot do this independently. I think we all forget what a visual world we live in. And once in a while, I wish everyone can see things with my eyes. Next slide, please. It's important to understand that without inclusion, there is no diversity. At CUNY, I've been part of a community of people who know me through my words and my actions, not through my disability. My disability only enhances our interactions. Education of not only the disabled, but about the disabled is the first step in the right direction. We all face adversity at some point in our lives. It's how we handle it. It's how we handle that enables us to succeed. It takes a community standing together, being visible, and demanding respect that enables society to see the value of the disabled as partners in society. I would like to thank everybody for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. And next we have another BA capstone student, Matthew Hines.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for having me. And Allison, thank you so much for sharing your experience. It's very powerful to hear others who also are experiencing what I've experienced, and also to hear about others' journeys at CUNY as well. So I'd like to thank the CAC for having me today. I just want to kick off this first slide and talk about what it means to have an awakening to disability and how that influenced my journey. So I think a lot of us in the community, in communities with disabilities in the disability space, we are very acutely aware that our own experience is very unique, and our own path is very unique, and we should be mindful of that. And I think taking that to heart, you know, as somebody who wasn't very educated on disability growing up, I think that it actually kind of pushed me to reach beyond my own experience with disability through my blindness since birth, and start to reach out to try to understand other disability, to other people's needs and desires. So I really wanted to pursue an education path that led me in that direction to better bolster my foundations of understanding of disability, the history, the experiences, and the future of that. And so through my education journey, I've encountered, through high school, through grade school, through my first 2 years of college, many barriers, many accessibility barriers, not all of them technology per se oriented all the time, but quite a few of them were, but also just a flaw in the design and the understanding of what is needed for people with disabilities, for me specifically, as I go through that journey, and really to have my eyes opened up to the world, and seeing that even though I'm going to college and I have these supports from the Disability Supports Office, and that's supposedly my department and the educators in that department are educated on what my needs are. What I've found, as I'm sure a lot of people have found in their past, is that that's not always true. And you can have all the supports from disability support offices, and that still might not make any change because the flaw technically still is in the planning and the system sometimes. And so it's not always an assistive technology accessibility relationship. Sometimes it's also a planning and logistics accessibility conversation, but we can talk more about that later. So what led me to in my journey after my first experience in my first 2 years of college was really sitting down and thinking about what things are important to me, what I want out of a program, what things I think I'm going to need to be successful going forward as a student, but also what is going to be the least friction to my success in education and my pathway to employment. And I think that's what we're all really here to talk about. So I think when I looked at CUNY, I was really excited because I saw a program for a bachelor's in disability studies, something that would really give me a holistic view of disability, give me an understanding of not just my own experience, but the experiences of many others throughout history. And I was really excited about that. I was really excited to get into that, to experience the different learning pathways that that would be open to me with this type of program. And I was actually really excited also to find a program rooted in disability, because I felt like all the programs that I was pursuing didn't have that foundation. And as somebody who's lived with a disability your whole life, the last thing you want to do is fight an uphill battle when you're at the very top trying to finish, your capstone or your college or your master's program, wherever you're at. So you always want to identify a program that's going to be the best equipped. And I truly felt that in my research, CUNY held that for me. And so as far as my experiences at CUNY, I would just say that I've had an overall great experience. And I would also say that I've noticed a lot of things that are have caused a lot of friction in my education. I've had to, encounter many technology related issues related to accessibility, whether it be through Blackboard, whether it be through third-party websites that are used by professors for educational resources, looking at how a lot of times multimedia and digital spaces are integrated into the courses, and those spaces not always being accessible. So again, like ensuring that third-party tool integration is accessible. So these are things that I would imagine coming into this school, any university, but specifically a program on disability, that these are things that would be taken care of. These are things that would be assessed before they even reach the hands of a student. There would be some sort of procurement, analyzing process to make sure that everything that touches the hands of a student or staff is accessible before it's even out there in the basically in the public. And so I was really surprised actually at that. And I was also very surprised that my bringing that feedback to several people at CUNY, professors and technical staff alike, that there wasn't really a cohesive, coherent response to the things that I was saying. And I'll share an example with that. My first time that I encountered a video that I was supposed to watch for a class, it was not audio describes, but it did have closed captioning. And when I tried to explain to the technical staff that it was closed captioned for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, but not for someone who, but there is no description of what's happening in the video for someone who is blind, low vision, or deafblind, they didn't understand the difference. And so I think it's not just about the expectation that professors and support staff from the disability office know what each student needs, but it's also incumbent and necessary for each department to understand the role of disability and the importance of that department's role in making sure that the accessible product is delivered. Next slide, please. So I picked this quote, and this quote has been used by many different people in many different ways, but essentially what the quote says is that I can't change the direction of the wind, but I can adjust my sails to always reach my destination. I can't change the direction of the wind, but I can adjust my sails to always reach my destination. Now, I picked that quote because that quote is used a lot to inspire people with disabilities to kind of call to action those to take their own self-determination and their own destiny into their own hands, and to adjust their world to be able to adapt. But I'm actually going to come at this quote from a different way. I'm going to come at this quote from the expectation that many people with disabilities throughout history, and currently as well as in the future, are still dealing with so much trauma and so much just so much extra in their life to try to even get to where everyone else is getting, to be able to do the things that everyone else is doing. It's a struggle, it's an everyday struggle, and it's been happening since the beginning of time. And what this quote is, to me, is a call to action for those who have not adapted to people with disabilities, to the communities with disabilities. This is a quote to call those to action who are relying on people with disabilities to always be the ones to tear down the barriers and to break those glass ceilings. This is a call to understand that the people with disabilities have been putting in the work, and it's time for society in general, for all of us who are involved in the education and employment of people with disabilities, to take note that we've been doing our part, and it's time for everyone else to step up and to adjust their sails so that we all can reach our destination. Because ultimately, if we truly believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion, if we truly believe in equity and equal, one another being equal, then we must expect that we all get to the same place, and we all have to adjust our sails to get there and be in step with one another, to be doing it together. And so I would just like to end by saying that I really appreciate the opportunity to speak on the different experiences I've had at CUNY. I do want to call upon all the people who have, to thank all the people who have done the work to make this as an accessible experience as possible for me. There is still much work to be done, and I'm very glad to be here to speak on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you both, Allison and Matt. And I'm going to be moderating, so if people have questions that they want to ask specifically of any of us, but I imagine most people would be most interested in what our students are saying, please go ahead and put that in the chat, and I'll be happy to read your questions to our students. I did want to just kind of probe a little bit further to both of you. Allison, I thought it might be interesting if you told us a little bit about how you got to CUNY. I know that you said you've had pretty good experiences here, but how did you arrive here? And the same question to Matt Hines.
I got here for RCC, who the disability office there was the disability office there was it was a struggle for me. I got my associate degree in sociology, and was working for the next step. I knew I wanted to be an advocate, but I didn't know where to go from here. I I I want to thank Megan, my mentor, Megan Dashes, for pushing me, showing me this program, and showing me the world of possibilities. Because that's how I really came here.
Thank you. And we have a comment from the chat that says, also, if you would care to comment on recent language that seems increasingly to present disability as a negative. This person says they've been thinking of the emphasis on being seen, being visible, and using lenses.
People need to stop using the word suffering. We're not suffering, we're living just in a different way. And people also need to stop using the word sick. I've had people come up to me and say, pull their child away from me because they think I'm sick. So that's been very traumatic for me.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Allison.
We need to look at the commonality that we have, not our differences.
Yeah, absolutely. I also liked what you said, and I wanted to highlight that you said without inclusion, there is no diversity, right? And I think that that's really important for all of us to keep in mind. I'm going to go back to Matt Hines with the same question I started with you, which is how did you find CUNY? And you gave us some really great examples of how we can think more about technology access, but what was your experience prior to coming to CUNY and how did you find this program?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. So I did a lot of research on the internet about bachelor's programs. There's very few, at least when I started back, I think in 2018, when I started researching, there wasn't a great deal of bachelor's programs that were related to disability. And so I was really excited, like I said, to find CUNY as I was doing my research on the internet and talking with a few people from back east. And so that's kind of what led me to make that, leap, especially, I could have gone to a university in my area, right? I live, just so everyone knows, I live on the West Coast and attend CUNY over distance learning, but I very well could have just said, I'm going to try to find a local school here and try to just find my way through that program. But I identified CUNY specifically because it looked to me on the outside as a program that had a really great foundation with disability. So that's kind of how I arrived there. And then as far as, I'm sorry, could you repeat the second part of the question?
Yeah, what was your experience prior to CUNY? You had gone to another college prior to coming to CUNY, or this was your only experience?
No, I had several. So as I mentioned earlier, I received my 2-year degree from a local college here. I've actually attended multiple colleges. I think I've attended university in Washington, in Utah, in Arizona, in California, and now in New York. And it's a very parallel experience in all those places that, there's usually accessibility issues with the course content, with the design of the course, with the professor's unwillingness to make a part of a curriculum accessible, or to adapt it to be more universally, to design it more universal for everyone. And so I really think that of the two experiences that stand out the most prior to CUNY and at CUNY is the accessibility barriers with different course content, and just really trying to break through those different barriers, those artificial barriers put forth by professors and other staff that didn't need to be there. And so I was really excited to get away from that. And I'm happy to report that while I haven't experienced as much of that at CUNY, I still have experienced it at CUNY. And so I think that's why it's important to keep these conversations going and to realize that this is an ongoing process. We don't just meet once a year to talk about disability, right? This has to be baked into the whole recipe of how people seek out their education, obtain their education, and move on from their education.
Absolutely. Thank you. And you spoke about that in during your slide presentation, was that flaw in design, right? Where we think we might be providing access, but we're not. And daily we're reminded, pre-pandemic SPS was the one online institution in all the 25 campuses of CUNY. And I know that our instructors, including myself and Matt, have gone through this online training and the theory behind universal design and the attempt to, in practice, engage with and use universal design. But we're still finding daily that we can improve upon universal design. I think that one of the gifts of the pandemic, however, is that because everyone had to go online immediately, they looked to us and said, how do we do this? And how can we also be thinking about universal design? And there again, we're still working. We have a lot of work to do, but at least now those 24 other campuses have been thrown into the mix in even greater way, right? And I
Right.
think that that's something that we'll take with us forward post-pandemic.
Cassandra, could I interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
Some of our attendees are having trouble seeing all of the panelists and
Oh.
the interpreter. Could we take the slide down, or do you need that still?
Sure, I can do stop share.
Thank you very much.
Is that better?
Let's hope so.
Okay, great. We have another comment from the chat. This person says, first, thank you so much for sharing your experiences. As a disabled librarian, I appreciate your takes on the nuance beyond, oh, we're compliant with the ADA, or, oh, we've met your accommodation request. My question, they say, are there things that the CUNY library or other libraries can do to make themselves accessible that would be helpful in other libraries or other campus spaces? Allison or Matthew, go ahead.
I'd be happy to take a crack at that. So I think one thing that could be helpful is that I think when we talk about like accessibility, I think it's been helpful in my experience that each department kind of has somebody who is the contact, the go-to person, or the, obviously we want everyone to be as educated as possible on accessibility, right, and disability, but there are going to always be times where someone's just going to know more than others. And so I think it's been very helpful in my experience to find departments having their own accessibility specialists. So for example, much like how CUNY Blackboard should have their own accessibility, technical support that's just for accessibility, I believe that the library also could very much benefit from that as well, because it's such an important resource, such a vast, large resource. It would be great to see the library having somebody who has understandings of universal design and assistive technology experience, as well as who has experience of kind of breaking down those barriers and getting people the information they need. I think that would be a very helpful tool. I'm sure others probably have great ideas too, but that's the first one that comes to mind.
Thank you. Allison, did you want to speak to that?
I can't really speak to that because I live outside of the city, so that didn't really apply to me. But I do want to say that the library online resources have been really helpful in different projects that I've done. But I just wanted to make a note really quickly that ADA is not about ADA compliance. ADA is not a building code, it's a civil rights law. And people need to start thinking along those lines, not if they're compliant or not. Or
Thank you.
if they're accommodating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just had, this is Matthew. I just had one other comment that just came to mind, if that's okay. I think it's also important, as many other organizations have taken the steps to open themselves up to new ideas and new ways of tearing down different barriers. I think it wouldn't be necessarily a bad idea to for CUNY to seek out a third-party organization to vet a lot of its programs, to vet a lot of its accessibility needs and gaps in services, and to be able to provide those recommendations, because we can certainly all gather here and share some resources and some ideas, but it's also really important to have that ongoing self-audit from CUNY about how they're doing and meeting those expectations, and an outside organization can provide that feedback and transparency as well.
Thank you. And I know, Matt Conlin, you had mentioned some issues that you had with making your course materials accessible, and specifically, I think, relates to the librarian question.
Yeah,
You wanna
it
speak
actually
on that a little
does. One of the things that I have experienced in my online course design, if I'm using any kind of multimedia, especially with my literature and film class that I teach, and sorry, my puppy might be whining a little bit in the back there. But for the library, essentially, when we've tried to do this movement where we make the course material free, right? A lot of our classes now are free materials. And when I was asked to sort of redesign my course to make it more cost effective, I started doing the streaming services through the library instead of asking students to buy the films through Amazon or through other services. And what ended up happening is that the library essentially told me that they have options for closed captioning, but they don't have audio description. And for that purpose, the students that need the audio description are going to I'll either have to find a way to buy those copies and send it to them, and or we'd have to find some kind of solution for that. And, I think where it gets complicated is I understand that within the infrastructure of society and within our colleges, there's a budget that we have to work with, and there are other things that come into play. But at the same time, I think that it's important to acknowledge that, it needs to be, as Matthew Hines has said, baked into the product. And so we need to start making changes to the system to say, like, okay, well, it wasn't included in this year's budget, but for that reason, next year's budget should include, the option to include audio description in these films, or to hire somebody to do the audio description for these films, or to hire an outside service that can do that somehow, whether it's, you know, digitally done or manually done. And, you know, when we talk about technology and education, I think it's important to say that we need to really focus on universal design for learning. And I think whether or not it's a legal thing, and you know, with the web content accessibility guidelines, it's not a legal thing in the United States. It's actually, it is included in some United Kingdom laws. But I think that it would be important to talk more about UDL and the web content access guide in the preparation to teach online that we were talking about. And to continue to remember that communication is key. When we face these problems, it's not just, oh, well, we don't provide that, so find an alternative. I think the next step is, okay, we don't provide that right now, so you might need to find an alternative. But now that we know, we need to make steps to change that for the next year.
And has CUNY thought about doing an Amazon subscription for them to just have? Because it's not just his classes that I went into this.
CUNY
With the
Amazon
Amazon accounts, you know, I've asked students if they don't have one to try and sign up. I know that if you get a student account, depending on what time of year you sign up, sometimes they give you a free year if you're a student and you prove that you're a student. But I think it would be nice if the library or the school was able to somehow reimburse students that need to find alternative formats that aren't available within our library or within other services. I know that that might be asking a lot financially, but you know, it would be nice to have it if we have the opportunity.
I totally agree.
And yes, Christopher Leiden, you're right, noting that the procurement process in the context of our public university system is in itself its own barrier. And you know, we try and work with it, but you know, it takes time, and it's a learning process.
Yeah, that's a great point. Another comment we have, well, let me read a couple of others. Allison Nolan says functional accessibility versus just compliance with the guidelines, right? Is one thing. But additionally, I can't see the full name. RO says it is not technically budget dependent. The need is the need. Audio description is very, very costly, of course, but librarians work with vendors to push the roadmap. At SUNY, State University of New York, this is something that is inherent in my job as a librarian, focused on digital accessibility. If we have enough time, we can get what faculty and students need. Often we aren't told with enough notice, but the disabilities office ultimately has to ensure the content is available in the format needed. Yeah, so as Christopher said, and Matt followed up, right? It's more than just money itself. Rebecca, thank you, Rebecca, Director of Digital Accessibility at SUNY Purchase. So yeah, I realize that, and I've had this experience where I'm preparing a new course, or I'm looking at readings or other materials or viewings for a course that I'm revamping, and there tends to not be enough time or enough people even on our campus to help me to make those things accessible. And I don't really know what that solution is, but I know that we can use more. We can use more assistance. Daniel Chan asks, does adding audio description to commercially available products / videos run afoul of copyright laws?
As a student, though, I feel that just recognizing the fact that something has to be done is the first step in the right direction. Anyway, even if you don't do it right away. I feel like my voice is being heard, which is great.
And to Dan Chan's comment, I think in some cases it might run afoul of copyright laws, but there are provisions specifically for education, educational purposes. And I think that, as long as, at least like when I get copies of streaming from the library, I request these films in advance, and
Yeah.
they actually have to get the legal rights to stream these movies. So if I'm asking for these films, they're already getting the legal rights to these films in order to allow me to use them in these courses. So I think that if the next step is to get audio description for these films, I think it would just, it should just be packaged in with that legal process that they're already doing.
Mhm. Yeah. And Martine says, oops, wait, it just went away. If it falls under an educational exception, isn't it allowed? I think typically it is or should be. Moira asks or says, wouldn't the audio description be protected by the same provisions that allow NLS to record books? One would think. To which Daniel has said, also, I wonder if CUNY would get a CUNY-wide subscription for audio description to a company that specializes in such services so we can get audio descriptions done.
This is Matthew, and I think that's where it really has to go, is that it really all starts at the front door, which it seems to me is the procurement process of these materials. And so I think step one is when we have to identify a content that needs to be used, that there is a guideline, a policy in place that vets the accessibility of that content before it even makes it into the hands of a professor or someone teaching class or a student. And then the professor at that point knows that they have training to test themselves or ask the right questions themselves on if what they're teaching this semester or this quarter is in fact accessible. And so I think it really comes back to that logistics, procurement, and planning, and having checkpoints at various in various spaces to bring on this accessible content, and to have also a system in place that allows people to report these issues and have a clear chain of command for these issues to be resolved.
Agreed, Matt. And I will tell you just from the other side, if I'm an academic director or a newly hired adjunct and there's an emergent need, right, for a new class, let's say somebody gets sick or somebody dies and I have to teach a class quickly, and I am, the semester's starting, I'm putting a whole new class together, whether it's in person or online, there just isn't going to be the time to vet, as you've said, everything. We could use somebody right there, instructional technologist and a person who is specializing in these sorts of UDL technologies, because I know, and Matt could speak to this too, right? We've been assigned a class last minute because someone wasn't available to teach it for whatever reason. And you are right then, oh, I need these materials. Or it might be a class I've taught several times, but I think I want to bring in a new film. I have this new reading. And so exactly, yeah, we could have an army of people ready for us. That would be the ideal instructional technology kind of gurus. I think it would be wonderful. Christina Stoss of SUNY says, and I think the mindset needs to be on our college campuses that it is not just the DS office, right? Disability offices responsibility, but the college as a whole. If DS is only given a very short amount of time to make something accessible, then at times it is not possible. so that faculty administrators need to get on board.
Right. A student's not going to know if something is accessible until they get into the class, which
Right.
then negates any ability for disability services to mediate that content. And so, yeah, it puts pressure on the professors, on all departments, as well as on, most importantly, the student who feels like they've been excluded. And that's where we come to that justice forward approach.
Yeah, yeah. And I know that my strategy is to ask all students, I already say, okay, here's some material. Please tell me if this is not accessible to you, and I'm going to work to make it so. Priscilla says, at Daniel, and a CUNY-wide subscription for captioning as well, please. Yes, we've been waiting for that CUNY-wide subscription. Audio description is very thorny. You can outsource to a company, but the quality can degrade and the message gets lost from the artistic intent. Filmmakers need to shift left and think about this from the start of the film budget and planning process. So taking it a step further, right, and putting it back on the producers. Everything after that is a huge lift, time consuming and costly. Additionally, some students with deep needs like AD don't register or identify early enough to allow us to meet that need. But that's, this person says, I'm sorry, Rebecca, but that's not a blame. It's the reality.
I think it goes back to what Professor Conlin said about universal design, because I think people need to understand what universal design is more in
Yeah.
order to implement the strategies that need to be across the board. And that them not recognizing my needs.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it is true, Rebecca. Audio description is very thorny. And you know, ideally, we would be in a world where Hollywood lived up to its liberalism. But you know, the truth is that if since we're living in a reality where, you know, this isn't a perfect world, and it's like you said, that it is a reality. I think that we need to have solutions in place for when these things aren't available. And like, you know, Matthew Hines has said, having, you know, a chain of command or a point person that can work with people even under time constraints would be, I think, very helpful for staff and faculty across the board.
I would be more than happy if CUNY wants to hire me. So.
Oh, yes. And as we've been talking, there have been comments also in the chat, which I was going to save till later, but since you brought it up, we do need people on our ADA committee. And I think both you and Matt Hines would be extremely beneficial to that committee as well. Another comment that I want to read, this is a question from Priscilla. Can we please have a CUNY-wide subscription to 3Play, and do they do audio description as well? Other people are saying this is a grant in the making. We have some at SPS, a participatory grant project. Maybe that is a place to get it, although I don't know if that's enough money. But here we are together. Priscilla says, let's keep building this environment. And I'm a bit shocked at the lack of lawsuits. Yeah. Deva is here as well. Thank you. Another faculty member. She says, as a disabled faculty member, it takes me double time to make some things accessible. First to me, then to students, like captioning my own video. So I just don't use it.
Is it okay if I comment on
Please.
the lawsuit? Because I know why there is a lack of lawsuits, because every single penny go to the warriors of of the of the business is it's it's a headache for people.
Yeah, I think that's often why most people, go ahead.
There's a process you have to jump through to do the complaint, and then they say the fine. They say the financial undue hardship. So a lot of people just get tired and frustrated and give up because it's not worth it. We have enough to fight for every day. And even the battles that you don't see, we're fighting internal battles every day.
You're absolutely right, Allison. And we had a presenter at CUNY just Tuesday night who's an attorney and spoke about the decades-long process of Willowbrook. And not only does it take years and years to get a judgment, but judgments aren't always enforced and people have to go back. So it is a lengthy process, and it speaks to how committed we have to keep being and how much work we have to keep doing. Yeah.
Can
that's
I comment on
reality.
that?
Please.
Yeah, I would just say too, yeah, the space is flooded with, you know, lack of accessibility barriers. And if we were to pursue every legal action that we were capable of pursuing, I think a lot of us would never be around to speak to anyone because we'd be in courtrooms or filling out paperwork all day. You know, I think disability is also, I hate to say it, but sometimes disability leads to a daily grievance that you experience, and it's not something where we necessarily sit and wallow in pity on it, but it is something that we experience like a car crash every day over and over. And so you also eventually become, a lot of people become desensitized to it as well. A lot of people lose faith in the system. A lot of people lose, just become at a point where they no longer can fight. And I think that's where we have to pick up that fight for the people who can't, because a lot of people have given up. A lot of people will continue to give up if the systems continue to remain this way.
Those are excellent points. And we're getting close to the end of our time. So I want to read a couple of other comments and allow for closing. One thing that might be a good thing in our future is Rebecca notes many of the film festivals are moving in that direction, right, of offering captioning. So we can hope that we are getting there. Ron says 3Play does not provide audio description services, right? We know that. We hope that changes again in the future if we keep holding these companies to that. Chris Leiden says at CUNY School Professional Studies and most other CUNY colleges, we do have an ADA/504 coordinator who investigates complaints and grievances. It is an official process, but not usually a legal one. So at each campus, we all have those. And we don't necessarily have to go lawsuit, but we can run these things through the process on the campus. Allison says, I hope we can keep making CUNY a truly welcoming learning environment for all students, faculty, and workers alike without having to go the legal route. I'm not faulting any of you at all. I'm part of this struggle and here with you, trying to do the best I can at LaGuardia Community College, mostly. Yeah, and I think that's where we are. If we go back to the idea of justice and thinking about what it looks like, right? That's that attention and that dedication that we can give to all in public. I want to thank everyone for being here. And
I want
go ahead.
I wanted to say thank you, Cassandra and Matt Conlin, for having me on this channel. I worked hard to get here, and so it's great to have this opportunity, and I hope to have more opportunities like this.
Thank you, Allison
Thank
and
you,
Matt
Allison.
Hines. I also wanted to end something that you said in particular, Allison. You said you have to work to strive for the impossible. And what I would like all of us to think about in closing is that we're striving for the possible. It need not be impossible. It's doable. And together with our dedication and commitment, we're making it possible. Thank you all so much for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Any
Have a wonderful spring break.
great.
Yes.
Thanks so much,
Yeah.
panelists. Any
Thank
final
you.
words from the presenters? I feel like you all nailed it, and I really appreciate the candor and the experiences the students especially shared, and faculty can be equally frustrated. And we have some work to do. So that's always exciting. At this point, I would like to wrap it up since we are just about at time. Thank you all. Thank you for showing up, attendees, participating, those of you who had questions and used the chat. Thank you so much again for the presenters from the CUNY School of Professional Studies, and we look forward to seeing hopefully many of you at the next session, which you won't want to miss. It's going to be the last session of this year's conference starting at 1:45 Eastern Time. It's called Getting Things Done in the Name of a More Accessible New York, The Power of Numbers, Partnerships, and Calculated Planning. And that's brought to you by members of the CUNY Coalition of Students with Disabilities. So more student stuff. We look forward to seeing you there. Take care, everyone. We're closing down.
Bye, thank you.
Great work.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Wait.
Okay, I'll be shutting down.
Take care. Bye.